side doing a lot. There we go. A lot of testing, and I also work in therapy doing depression, anxiety, and a lot of trauma work. So I'm happy to be here tonight and turn it over to Sarah.
Oh, what happened to, there she is.
There's Sarah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Bills. I apologize due to some technological difficulties. I'm on my phone, so I don't know how that's showing up on your guys' end. But I also work at Cincinnati Children's. I'm a resident in behavioral medicine and clinical psychology, meaning that I am working on with a variety of different clinics across a number of rotations, but across all of them working with children and families with various medical conditions and supporting them.
There we go.
All right. So on our agenda today, we wanted to provide just a brief overview of what we'll be covering. So we'll start by laying the foundation for positive behavioral support, defining what we mean by that and what that includes. And then we'll talk about some of the specific skills within positive behavioral support, such as active listening and different do's and do nots that can help promote a positive environment. And then we'll also talk about when to seek help and also where you can get support and help if needed. We'll go over and spend a bulk of our time on different troop scenarios. So different scenarios that might come up where some of these skills may be useful or applicable. And then lastly, we'll talk about different ways to support each other as staff and ways to engage in self-care. And then we'll leave some time at the end for questions.
So the first thing we're going to talk about is what is positive behavioral support? What are the definitions of things that we're going to be working and using as we talk through this? So the first piece is positive. We want to focus on being positive and constructive and optimistic in our interactions with the girls. We want to take this kind of for the girl, how can we be positive for the girl and talk, not necessarily talking to them, but with them. Behavioral, it's any of the behaviors that we observe, it's how we conduct ourselves, anything that anybody does that involves an action. It's the interactions we have with our girls and with each other. Support, it's the act of giving assistance. It's not a discipline or behavioral control model. It is the ways that we show up and support the girls we're working with. And then combining it all together, positive behavioral support. It's the art of using your own constructive and optimistic approach to assist and guide the actions of others to a positive outcome and how the other girls interact with each other. So we're going to talk a little bit about what each camper brings with them. We're working with our high schoolers. So kind of setting the stage, what was it like? Think about what you were like back in high school. For me, that seems to, I don't want to admit how long ago that really was. But what were kind of some of the things that you were into at that time? What were some of the things that you were going through? What were some of your fears about in high school? Think about the experiences you were having at that time. So these are all of the invisible things that girls bring with them to camp. It's the things that might be going on under the surface, anything that they're going through that we don't necessarily see, but that impact how they interact with you and how they interact with their other fellow campers, other Girl Scouts. So now we're going to talk about, this is our approach. We typically start at the bottom, the positive atmosphere. This is the foundation for everything that we're going to do. Most of the issues that you are going to see are going to fall into the blue and green. Normal adjustment challenges, some of that difficulty engaging, mildly disruptive behaviors, simple rule violations. We're going to break this down further as we continue talking, but we see fewer instances of our orange and red But we know those can be the most stressful. And so that's why we're going to do some of the scenarios to help give you some support and guidance around navigating situations that might bump into those areas so you feel more comfortable and confident navigating these.
All right. And so in thinking about how we can try to promote staying in that blue and green area of the triangle, active listening is one of the baseline skills that we can use to kind of help promote positive communication and positive interactions with our girls. And so active listening is defined as a pattern of listening that helps you stay engaged with the person you're speaking with in a positive way. And that's defined as listening attentively while reflecting on what somebody else is saying. And there are specific ways, both verbal and nonverbal, that you can communicate to the person you're speaking with that you are engaging in active listening. And one of the important pieces about active listening is it does help you build relationships, but it also helps you gather information that might be necessary to help you assess where on that pyramid you might be falling in terms of kind of what level of crisis that situation or that conversation might fall into. And so the benefits of active listening include that it can build trust, it can strengthen your patience, broaden your perspective, make you more approachable to the girls, increase your knowledge and understanding of what might be going on for the girls in that moment, and help you do some problem solving with the girls. Thinking about kind of the specific behaviors, both verbal and nonverbal, that can communicate that you're engaging in active listening. Some of the nonverbals are just smiling, kind of nodding your head in response to what the girl might be saying, engaging in eye contact, leaning in, and minimizing distractions. So really giving your full attention to what is being shared with you in that moment. Verbal indicators of active listening include providing some brief verbal positive reinforcement, so saying yes or things that we would normally do in conversation, maybe without realizing it, but trying intentionally to include those. Asking questions, reflecting back what might be said, or paraphrasing to demonstrate they are really listening.
So now we're going to focus on some of the do's and do nots when using the skills. So this is how to create that positive atmosphere and use the skills to handle some of the more normal adjustment behaviors. So the first one is anticipate that there's going to be challenging behaviors. Set the tone and intention from the beginning and anticipate difficulties. This is not a worst case scenario. We're not setting it up that we're anticipating the worst thing is going to happen. It's just that we expect that there's going to be some normal adjustments, and this way we can be prepared with a plan for how we're going to address them. Remember that you're the model and you are there to help them make the good choices. So by setting that tone for what your expectations are clearly from the beginning, it helps alleviate some of those challenges that you might be facing later on. You also want to be mindful to choose your battles carefully. You know, one thing that's important is you don't have to enforce every little rule violation, but you also want to make sure you're not missing when some of the bigger rules are getting violated and letting things slip through. And in choosing your battles carefully, you want to make sure that you have the time, the energy, and support to follow through with whatever those consequences are. It's really important to set clear limits before each activity from the beginning, and stick with them. You know, before you go into each activity, set what you expect from the girls. What are the behaviors you want to see from the girls? What are the things you expect from them? Also, kind of on the flip side, if you have somebody who maybe engages in some more frequent disruptive behaviors, they've kind of been pushing the limits a little bit more, this might be an opportunity to talk to them and say, you know, these are the expectations for this. If you don't follow these, you're going to have to sit out, you won't be able to participate, and then following through on whatever that limit is that you set. So they clearly know what's expected of them and what will happen if they're not following the rules. You know, pay attention to what all the girls are doing. Focus on the positive wherever and whenever. We want to catch them being good. We don't want to, it can be really easy to focus on the negative behaviors, to get sucked into maybe the one that is causing all of the drama, the one that is being disruptive the most. So we can sometimes miss some of our quieter girls, or we can even miss opportunities to connect with that girl who's displaying challenging behaviors in a positive way. So this might look like, let's say Susie was really helpful pointing that out. Susie, thank you so much for helping me pick up after the activity today. Or Jenny, thank you so much for cleaning up so nicely, or putting the chairs away. Catch those moments and really focus on pointing them out to the girls. And again, just to reiterate, be very clear what your expectations are. We often think that if we're direct and concrete in what we're saying, that it can be kind of mean, but it's actually not. It's incredibly helpful. Those rules, those boundaries, they help the girls know what the expectations are, what you expect from them as girls, and how you can model the appropriate behavior for them. So sometimes I know we can kind of gently say, can we please do this? Let's, and that doesn't always get us what we need, especially in moments where we need them to follow the expectation. There's an expectation of participation. And if we're sort of gently nudging them, we might not get them to comply with what we're asking them to do. So we want to be able to tell them what we need rather than always asking them, particularly in those times when participation is expected or certain rules need to be followed in a certain way.
Continuing with those do's and do nots, really important to take your time in responding to any situation that might arise. And so remembering that you do not have to react right away. In fact, it can be helpful to model this for the girls, that it is normal and often beneficial to pause, take a moment to collect yourself, be mindful of your reaction to the situation, your thoughts and feelings, and even step away for a moment if needed to be able to then come back and direct the situation in the way that's going to be most helpful. So again, kind of thinking about how we would want our girls to behave in terms of thinking before they act, we have an opportunity oftentimes to model that for them in the moment, particularly in moments that might be more challenging. Going on what we were talking about earlier with kind of administering thoughtful and effective consequences. So ensuring that if there's going to be a consequence for a distracting behavior, or if you set a very clear limit and that limit is violated, ensuring that the consequences are natural and logical and appropriate to the challenging behavior. So for instance, if it's a minor rule violation, we don't necessarily want to escalate and have a consequence that is not matching the minor rule breaking that might have occurred. And along with that, it's really important to not allow those consequences to build up. So if a girl has misbehaved and you've administered the consequence, she then starts over with a clean slate and has an opportunity to be on her best behavior and engage in the next activity. And this can be really important because for kids and for teens, it can be really disheartening if they're accruing a large number of negative consequences. And it can get to the point where they may feel that they can't dig themselves out of that hole, which can then lead to the thought is, what's the point? Does it even matter for me to try to adjust my behavior? Hence really trying to, again, avoid those negative consequences that might build up. And reiterating what we discussed on the last slide, being consistent and following through on those consequences. Because when we do not do that, teens and our girls will learn that we don't necessarily mean what we say. And we do want to ensure that what the instruction we're providing and the limits that we're setting are being followed. Again, reiterating what was just, did you have something you wanted to add?
I just wanted to add something really quick. Sorry to interrupt, Sarah.
No.
Just kind of pulling in some of the information too from your handbook, and we'll be referencing this more in a moment, is also wanting to explain why certain behaviors aren't appropriate in certain situations. For example, a girl could get hurt, it's not safe. That way you can reinforce why that behavior is not accepted in that certain situation and why consequences and having those rules might be really important. And it's also maybe wanting to go with more withdrawal of privileges, like you don't get to participate in this activity, rather than having add in something that they don't want to do, because then it's just can be a little bit more coercive. We want to avoid some of those coercive discipline strategies, and kind of have the consequence match what the behavior was. So sorry, Sarah, continue.
No, that was helpful to clarify and add some of those additional points. And again, I know we discussed this briefly on the last slide as well, but really paying attention to when our girls are following the rules and are following those limits that we set. And so I think we sometimes might overlook the value and the impact that praise can have. In fact, we do know that praise can often be generally is more effective than punishment or even consequences. And so what this might look like is if there is a challenging behavior occurring, but it's relatively minor, and you see a girl that is following the rules and setting and following those limits, praising that girl for doing what she's told and for complying with the rules, as opposed to focusing all that attention on one of the girls that may not be following through on those limits. And sometimes that alone can shift the behavior of the group, because teens, even maybe a little bit less so than younger kids, but teens are still highly motivated by praise from adults. And again, kind of noting it can make them feel very important, especially if somebody is following the rules, and giving them that shout out in the group can really help build that relationship and model, and let them be the model for their fellow girls in the group as well. And then another really important point is a lot of what we've been talking about are externalizing behaviors, meaning kind of acting out behaviors that might be really readily observant because they're causing disruption to the larger group. But we also want to be really mindful of internalizing behaviors as well. So those might be things that aren't causing disruptions to the larger group, but might look more like one of the girls in the group withdrawing, or really not interacting with the other girls. This might be out of character for her. It might look like not participating, or just seeming very to herself. And again, sometimes this might reflect just a shyer personality. We don't immediately want to jump and assume that girl might be feeling down or anxious, but it is really important to monitor and keep an eye out for that, because sometimes teens that present with more internalizing behaviors may be overlooked.
So when to seek help? Anytime you're unsure. The manual that you have that Jeanette has placed in the chat, especially in like pages 12 to 15, there's a great chart that kind of breaks down some of the more common behaviors you'll see, particularly some of the more orange and red moments, and sort of how to navigate that and what steps we should take. Even though yellow and red items on our pyramid are less frequent and less likely to occur, they're still the most distressing. And we always want to err on the side of being overly cautious for the safety of our girl and the other girls around her. So when do we seek help? Anytime you're unsure, anytime anyone's safety is at risk. First, when you recognize that there is an issue, take a moment to gather yourself. None of these issues that you're going to encounter will need that immediate next 5-minute reaction. So take a moment, gather yourself, and then reach out. We do this professionally. There are moments where we have crisis situations, and we often take that time to consult. What are the next steps? So when in doubt, consult. And don't feel like you have to be the investigator or the problem solver. You don't have to figure it out. You can ask follow-up questions, use some of those active listening skills, kind of gather some more information so that when you do go back to your leads, you can have more information, and then they can typically take it from there. I know you'll be trained a little bit more in some of the red area skills, but I also know that your troop leads are going to be the ones who kind of escalate some of those situations and navigate through them with you. So for our orange situations, those are the serious issues with no immediate life threat. Typically, we have an immediate caregiver notification during those instances. And then the potentially life-threatening issues. These are times the girls might make self-harming statements or threatening, serious threats to others. There is typically an immediate notification of the caregivers and, when appropriate, the authorities. But again, these are things that your lead will be navigating through with you or for you. Again, these happen rarely, but it's still really helpful to have the manual with you so you can kind of consult and refer back to that to guide what the next steps are. And again, when in doubt, consult.
All right, so this leads us to our scenario-based activity for today. And I believe what we're going to do in terms of this interface is, as a large group altogether, we will talk through some of the scenarios using the chat feature, which will allow.
I think it's going to go a little bit differently because we don't have as many. I'll let Jeanette set this one up.
Great.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I will defer.
Thanks. Can we first maybe go back to a question that just came in the chat?
Sure.
And they're talking about, with whom do we consult? And since this group is our troop leaders, I would consult with your co-leader. And also, if it's in the orange and red area, you may, the red area for sure, bring the caregiver in. Hopefully you have good relationships with your caregivers of your girls, and you may need to bring a caregiver in. And of course, you might want to pull the girl aside and just sit and have a conversation and use those active listening skills, because things go on that at least as an introvert myself, I'm internally struggling and it affects my external interactions. And sometimes I just need someone to listen to what I'm struggling with, and just somebody asking the question, hey, I noticed that you're just not yourself. What's going on? Can make all the difference in the world. Particularly when I was a teenager. So when I was, 16, 17 years old. So I would say first your co-leaders, then I would consult with caregivers and look at it as a partnership, that you're in partnership with those caregivers to really take care of the girls. I don't know, Caitlin or Sarah, if you have anything to add.
I think that's a great point, Jeanette. I know from the clinical work that we've been doing, we are seeing a lot more girls struggling a little bit, especially since the pandemic. And so you might see more of those internalizing, withdrawn behaviors, especially when they get a little overwhelmed in situations. And like Jeanette said, that simple check-in, hey, I noticed you seem a little off. Is something going on? Or, hey, do you need a moment? Can we chat? Is there anything you want to chat about? Just ways that you can show up in small, like that you're noticing that there's something off or that they're not as connected with the group, shows that, you are really attending to what is going on with them. And like I said, you don't have to problem solve. You don't have to fix it for them. But the fact that you are showing up, you are taking that time to invest and listen in them, using those great active listening skills. Sometimes you can resolve through the issue. Sometimes you might have to consult and escalate it up. It really just depends, but taking that little bit of extra time to meet with the girls, even try to minimize some of the distractions, try to maybe have everybody else quieter or working on something else, pulling them aside a little bit differently, just to give that more directive one-on-one attention.
Mm-hmm. All right. And before we go into scenarios, are there any other questions? Start with the school rivalry.
I'm going to read this one.
Yeah, if you want to read it.
Okay. Parker, an 11th. Oh, the worrisome threat. Okay. I think this is the worrisome threat. I thought we were going to start with the rivalry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not click on the right slide. There we go.
So your troop of 10th grade Girl Scouts are from 2 different schools and have clearly divided into 2 groups based on their school. Lately, one group has shown aggression toward the other group. The schools are big football rivals. However, this has never been an issue. You overhear girls from one school making fun of the girls from the other school. They keep asserting how much smarter, better, and prettier they are since their school won over the other school. This is affecting the activities of the whole group. At the last meeting, one girl deliberately pushed another girl and screamed, "Shut up, bitch." So we got a lot going on here.
So let me go to the pyramid. And where do you think we are on the positive behavioral support pyramid here? And we've got challenging behavior. I'm going to see if I can I don't think I can unmute everybody. If you'd like to speak, you can raise your hand and I will unmute you. But I'm hearing, or I'm seeing yellows. What do we think, Caitlin?
That's exactly where I would place it. We have a lot of rule violations. We have a lot of unhealthy, unsafe behaviors, a lot of relational aggression towards each other. And then now it has started to escalate into that physical aggression and kind of some of that bullying, threatening behaviors. So keeping in mind that this is some of our challenging behaviors, what might be some ways to kind of that you might approach managing these situations? I'd love to hear from you all on what you think might be some steps to take to address these behaviors, or where I guess we should start. There's so much going on. We have the whole group is kind of forming their own little clique here. And then on top of that, we have a pretty escalated other situation with one of the girls. So there's like multiple things that we can talk through and different ways that we can talk through it.
You can either type response in the chat or raise your hand. Okay. Jess is saying physical needs to be addressed. The physical needs need to be addressed quickly, then help them to find common ground.
That's great. I agree. I think in terms of addressing the physical needs with the one girl, that is definitely one of those situations where we might enter, where we are going to need to involve the caregiver in that. There is physical aggression, the girl, that is an escalation to another point. So that is typically the caregiver needs to be notified and we need to take steps to address that. There's also one of those situations where you can consult with another team lead on how to address that situation if you're unsure now that it's escalated into that physical piece. That falls into our crisis, yellow, immediate threat with no life-threatening injury right now.
And then Barb says, break up cliques and encourage working across school groups to get them working together.
Absolutely. I think that that's a great idea, you know, giving, trying to come up with some common ground. What do they have in common? What are some things that they can work on together? Part of it too is making everybody come together, joining that circle, having that communication with each other, modeling those good communication skills, you know, one person talking at a time, we're not shouting over each other, we got to show each other respect, or modeling and grounding back in those Girl Scout motto, the Girl Scout values that we have. You know, other ways too, there's a great handout in our manual all about clique management. apparently I can't show you my paper with this filter on, but it's in there, I promise. Try to come up with the group ways to brainstorm that they might be able to resolve through this. Giving them an activity where they have to work cooperatively together, where the success of one is dependent on the success of other, and they have to unite in a teamwork to reach that common goal, really helps to bridge that distance. Sarah, is there anything else that I'm missing here?
No, I think you did a good job covering all of the bases there. I was just going to note, but I think you had already highlighted, which going back to why we have certain limits and explaining why we have certain rules, really grounding that, as you mentioned, in the Girl Scout motto and the values that Girl Scouts uphold broadly, and how that fits in with respecting each other and working together as a team, and trying to kind of unite across those common values.
That's a great point, Sarah.
I participated in a training years ago where we talked about something similar with cliques and the in crowd, the out crowd, things like that. And one of the things that the facilitator talked about was having something that symbolizes the beginning of the meeting and the end of the meeting. So while you're in that space, this is a safe space. This is a space where, and we have the Girl Scout opening circles that they do as young girls. I'm not sure about older girls if they want to stand around and in a circle and do all that, but sometimes for older girls it might be, we have a little candle, if you're allowed to light it in your meeting space, a little candle we light, and while that is lit, this is the behavior and this is the respect we're going to give to one another. Not to say that when it's out, it's a free-for-all, but let's start with, in our meetings, this is what we agree to, and have it be something that is done every meeting, so that it indicates this is a safe space where we're not going to talk about school rivalry. We're not going to talk about what happened at the football game. We're going to talk about what we're doing as a one Girl Scout troop together. So it could be something the girls come up with as well. So
absolutely. I think that's a great point. And I think that goes back to setting that expectation early and then continuing to reinforce it, that while you're within this room, while you're within this space, those rivalries don't exist. This is your safe space. We want everybody to feel safe and welcome here. And that means this, and this for everybody.
Okay. Any other comments, suggestions, questions? Make sure people don't have their hands up. No. Okay. Let's, our next one was the worrisome threat.
Pretty common. Okay. Parker, an 11th grader, made 2 comments that concern you during your last Girl Scout meeting. In the large group at the beginning of the meeting, when asked to describe how her day was, Parker says, "Horrible, I'm going to kill myself." You recognize the comment and ask her what made it horrible, and she says, "Everything, including failing a test and dropping her lunch tray in front of everyone in the cafeteria." Horrible, just horrible. You replied that all of that sounds hard, and that you were sure that she will do better on her test, and then everyone will forget that she dropped a tray. Later in the meeting, during a small group activity, she again makes a comment about killing herself. Now you are worried, however, do not know what to do next. So where on the pyramid would you place this?
I think it's unanimous.
Red.
Red.
Yeah, and this is one of those instances where having the discussion with the girl in terms of, what is kind of going on. This is a time where you will want to bring in the, consult, and then you're going to have to bring in the parent as well, largely because we want to know, is there a history of this? Is this just, we always want to take this seriously, but we want to know, is this, a moment where we need to escalate this and it is red and we need to get this girl out and get her help? Is this just a statement and she has a history of making statements? So some of those active listening, talking through statements aside from everybody else of what she means by that. How is she defining wanting to hurt herself? Also, take a breath when you encounter the situation, gather yourself, maybe talk to one of your other team leads about how you would handle this, because this is a really stressful situation. This is stressful for us as clinicians, and we have a patient come in and say, I think everybody would be better off if I was dead, or I just don't want to be here anymore. That sometimes those statements are stressful for us too. So take a moment, gather yourself, then go talk to the girl, figure out a little bit more what's going on. So what are some other strategies or other things that you can think of that you might want, ways that you might handle this situation as well? Or other questions you have about how to navigate through this? Absolutely, inform parents. We also, I remember this from our last presentation we did over the summer, we never want to promise the girls confidentiality. There are certain situations where we have a duty to break that confidentiality. And this is one of those situations where we can't keep this private, nor should we be expected to. This is a situation that warrants an escalation to informing the parents and might need a higher level of intervention. You guys don't have to figure that out, but just saying that that's something that could potentially be coming down the line for her.
So Jess is also saying providing resources to youth hotlines for skilled intervention.
Absolutely, that can be helpful. That's also, you, like I said, you don't have to feel the need to do that. I think if you want to, 988 is the new suicide prevention hotline. But I would also be, again, working with the families, having them start to figure out what those next steps are. They might already have some support in place for them.
So Joyce is asking, if this happens during a Girl Scout activity, is there a requirement path to report to the Girl Scout office? That is a good question. And I don't think that there is a requirement unless there, I'm digging for my volunteer essentials. So you'll excuse me, it's sitting on the floor to the left of me. I think there is a responsibility for the troop leaders to first bring in the caregivers, and then I would think if the caregivers are not willing to, or if there's resistance or it is continuing, then I would reach out. And you can always reach out to our volunteer HR manager at the Girl Scout Center, or your community development manager, who will then escalate it. I would say first step is that caregiver conversation. And if it is escalating with the girl, or the caregivers are doing nothing and it is still a worrisome threat, then escalate it up.
Absolutely. And I would talk to the girl one-on-one. I would not bring the entire group in on this. This is a private thing. And particularly if you have concerns that she really is in danger, and this isn't just a statement that she's making, for, like we said, err on the side of caution and pull her aside and talk to her one-on-one.
Yes. And I would also caution, just out of, in another, early in my career when I worked in colleges, in student activities and student development, I would not hesitate to have the conversation with the caregiver. There should be no hesitation when there is a danger of a girl hurting herself. So hesitation could be a bad thing. So if you can, talk to those caregivers that day, that, you know, as soon as you can, in a private way. Again, not in front of everybody, and out of genuine concern and care for the girl, which we all have. So, yeah.
Anybody have anything else they want to add to this one? I know this is a super stressful situation that can escalate really quickly. So great comments and questions. Anybody have anything else they want to add?
I did just want to note as well, to reiterate, I think points that you both made, that the importance of that taking a pause moment and kind of collecting and recognizing, as Caitlin had mentioned, that even for us as clinicians, it is stressful to have a patient or a client or a girl or a teen express those types of thoughts. So recognizing that it is normal for you as an adult that cares about the well-being of the girls to have an instantaneous reaction of maybe a little bit of panic or, oh no, what am I supposed to do with this information? But reflecting back that it is okay to pause for a moment, assess your emotional reaction to the situation, and then be able to proceed with those necessary steps of notifying the necessary people, consulting with your co-leader or another troop leader that may be present, and just kind of taking a moment to ensure that everyone's safe and that you're able to have that private conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in my experience, I had a close friend whose daughter was cutting herself, and I discovered it. And it was hard and it was awkward, and she was embarrassed, but I told her, you know, this is something that we are going to your parents. Either you do it or we do it together. And if you don't do it, then I will do it. So these are your options. You have no, we're going to have this discussion because I care about you. And I just really reiterated how it hurt me seeing that and how much I cared about her. And so we're going to do this together. She's not alone. And there's the importance of not hesitating and just being honest with your feelings. And it's not going to be perfect. I mean, I stumbled through it. But the most important thing was the help that she received because her parents were made aware. And my conversations weren't perfect. There were tears, there was concern, there was anger, there was forgiveness. There's you're going to go through a lot of different things, potentially, maybe not, but potentially, depending on the situation. But taking that step and having that conversation, regardless whether you're prepared or not, has to happen.
I agree. And I think that, sometimes, like we've talked about before, just that act of showing up, telling them you're not alone in this, I'm here with you, we can do this together, or I can be there when you do it, I can tell your mom and dad, but I'm here to support you through this. That can be huge for them, because it can be really overwhelming to tell your parents this is something that's been going on. And so you, another trusted adult who's modeling these positive behaviors, who's created this safe space already, showing up and navigating this challenging moment with them is incredibly important, and really creates this positive, safe space for them, that this might be one of the few spaces they have. And that's really great that you're showing up and giving the girls that space that they need.
I am going to go on to another scenario, even though it wasn't chosen. But the affectionate couple.
Yes, this one comes up a lot. So where would everybody sort of place this one? Well, I gather my notes. I have good notes on this one.
And I'll just read it. At your cadet camp out, you notice two girls are holding hands and you see them kiss goodbye as they go to their different patrol activities. A couple other girls giggle and say, "Oh, they're in love." And another girl says, "I think it's trash." Oops. I go back.
Normal.
So where does this fall? We've got a normal, green, Green. It looks like everyone's saying it's a normal adjustment.
I would agree. It is a, more of a normal adjustment. Nobody's being hurt at this particular junction. There's no immediate concerns for anybody. It's late in the day. I apologize. I have 17 papers in front of me. So one thing we want to, what are some ways that you all might handle the situation? Before I talk at you some more, tell me how you all might navigate this, or what are some ways if you've encountered this before, ways that you might go about handling this with the girls.
So need to have a discussion about appropriate troop behavior and public displays of affection. There's also that, if you can't, reminding girls that if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. So,
sure. I think, we want to not make a huge deal of it in front of the other girls, because that can lead to some embarrassment. It can lead to even more conflict with some of the girls, them feeling like they're being singled out. Try to talk to them one-on-one or both of the girls privately. You want to create that positive environment, slow down, be warm. Tell them, if you model kind of like, hey, it's okay, but we have to set some limits here. Remind them that like, there is no PDA here. It wouldn't matter if it was boy, girl, 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 boy, boy. It doesn't matter. That's just one of our basic rules. And it's not a big deal unless they make it a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts on this? I think this is one too, that this is a green. It can move into yellow if the relationship is interfering with the activities. It's creating chaos in the group. But this really is a green, just a healthy reminder about the boundaries and not really a huge deal. Just kind of reinforce that rule, move forward.
Okay. Any other comments from our participants on this one?
Y'all are doing great. I know there's not very many of you, so you're on the spot right away, but you all have some great comments and we appreciate your participation.
I would like to know if there are situations that you would like us to specifically talk about, or if you have questions of Caitlin and Sarah related to what you're experiencing with your girls.
Absolutely.
So you can have a direct or somewhat direct. And again, we could unmute people. So when girls interrupt a lot and have to make the conversation all about themselves.
Oh, these are some good scenarios.
Yeah.
Well, I will start with one and we'll kind of work our way through and kind of turn one over to Sarah. I don't know if Sarah wants to take one or, but so the girl who interrupts a lot, that's kind of one of our normal green adjustment areas. That's kind of a reinforcement of the rules. That might be a time when we are kind of doing the only one girl talks at a time, reminding them of the respect, some of those core values. Again, hey, these are the rules. I really appreciate what you have to say. And we have to let, Sarah talk. I didn't mean that directly to Sarah. It's just the name that popped up there. Redirecting as needed, and then kind of going into when you can catch them in some of the good things. So you're noticing the positive aspects of things that they're doing and not always focusing on the negative. Sarah, is there anything else you want to add to that one?
No, I think as you had mentioned, that differential where we want to reinforce positive behaviors, and when possible, we want to ignore behaviors that aren't in line with the expectations we've set, but really doing that redirecting. So highlighting not only what the girls should not be doing, but what the behavior that we do want to see, to kind of demonstrate and model the alternative that would fall in line with the rules and the expectations that we've set.
And, I know this is older girls, but I have had a lot of experience with youth and working with different groups of youth, and they're not. I have used talking sticks with kids that are in 7th, 8th, 9th grade. I know we talk about that in our working with daisies and brownies, but if it is a real problem with the troop, it might be like coming up with something like a talking stick. It might be something really cool that the girls come up with, that they can, if you're having a conversation where you really want to hear from everyone, that may be how you need to just monitor it, and make sure that you're calling out girls also that have not spoken. Or you might be able to have the conversation in smaller groups, because the person who talks a lot may overpower the large group, and the people that are quieter, the girls that are quieter, may feel like it's not even worth me bringing up anything. But in a small group, they might have that opportunity. So you might want to think about small groups, pairs, talking sticks. So, how about the girl that gets sad and feels responsible for everyone having a good time? Lots of tears.
Sarah, you want to take this one? You want me to take this one? Oh, you unmuted. All right, go for it.
To jump in. So I'm really glad that somebody raised this specific question, because it gets to the point we made earlier in the presentation about really recognizing the girls that might present more with internalizing concerns as opposed to some of those more disruptive behaviors. And so I think that this can be tricky, because obviously, a girl that's becoming very emotional could become disruptive as well to the larger group. But I think when possible, if you notice that somebody is really struggling and maybe is more sensitive and becoming more emotional, being able to maybe create some space to have a one-on-one discussion with that Girl Scout, to be able to kind of talk about like what is maybe driving some of that emotionality. So if she's very worried and anxious about how everyone else is getting along, perhaps providing a reminder that, that's why we are here as troop leaders. That's why we are here to help kind of facilitate the larger group. We want you all to be able to bond and have a good time. And that's why we have the leadership here to kind of manage and look over and make sure that everyone is enjoying themselves, and kind of try to put their mind at ease that there is somebody that is managing that and has their eyes on how the group as a whole is doing, but that's not their responsibility, that they are here to be able to have fun and enjoy spending time with their fellow troop mates. Caitlin, do you have anything else that you would add?
Yeah, I think that was a great point about managing these. These are kind of one-on-one conversations too that we can have of, what might be driving this, what might be kind of causing some of these. Why do you feel like it's your responsibility to make sure everybody's having fun, or what can we do to maybe make it more fun, or bringing her into that discussion, having maybe her help create an activity, or working with somebody to create an activity if that's possible. That might be a good opportunity to give her a task to do that she might enjoy. Maybe she doesn't like one of the activities, but she likes kind of maybe she doesn't like this way to participate, but she likes this way to participate. But that is really hard, especially when we see a lot of the anxiety modes of we want to have that control, and sometimes we can't. And that can lead to some tears and some frustration. And so that also might be a discussion with parents too, to say, hey, we're having this issue a lot with Jenny in our group, what are some ways that you guys have found at home when she feels responsible for everybody else that you can help navigate, that we might be able to use in our meetings that might help get her more involved or get her to focus more on actually enjoying herself and having fun and connecting better.
All right. So we have another one. What about the girl who's not good at compromise while the others always compromise?
Ooh. My favorite little rigid kiddos. These are the ones I work with. I think this is a good one to talk to, kind of potentially work with parents as well. Again, going back to that point of what are some ways they help navigate through the rigidity, because I guarantee it's not just happening at Girl Scouts. And then we can also talk about, finding ways to engage her differently. And that I don't think it's always fair that the other girls have to compromise just to meet that girl's need. I think that can, finding ways that we can create a positive atmosphere for all, and that there are times where she might have to be flexible. And, if we need her to participate, and if she doesn't participate or want to participate the way we're participating, but there might end up being some of those natural consequences too, that she might have to sit out the activity if she's going to be disruptive, but setting that clear expectation from the beginning that we're going to be doing this activity today. I appreciate that you don't necessarily want to do this. However, this is the participation we're expecting. And if we don't participate, this is what could potentially happen. So you have some confidence in there to be like, this is the expectation and how we want you to follow that. So using some of those other positive supports that we've talked about previously.
Mm-hmm. I have one, because this was me when I was a senior Girl Scout. It was pre-ambassadors. But the girl who is experiencing extreme anxiety about graduation, going off to college, the big changes that are happening, leaving the family, going away, and it's exhibiting itself in difficult behaviors, short-temperedness, withdrawal from things, just lots of tears at times, and you don't know why, that type of stuff.
Sarah, you want to take this one?
Sure thing. So I think, that is an experience that many people can relate to, reflecting back when we were at that point in our life. And that I'm sure many girls in troops currently might be facing as they're getting towards that college or whatever that transition might be on the other side of that transition from high school. I think going back to some of those positive behavior skills, specifically the active listening, because as you had pointed out, sometimes that core struggle or that core stressor might present in a lot of different ways. It could be more externalizing behaviors with becoming irritable. It could be more internalizing behaviors with that withdrawal. But it's hard to really know what could be helpful to support the girl without first doing some active listening and being able to identify what is at the center of all of this. And that's where, if you are noting and you've been with this troop for a while, like, hey, what's going on? You seem more frustrated than usual. You seem more withdrawn than usual. Would it be helpful to talk about things, and doing that reflection, those verbals and nonverbal signs that you really are invested and want to hear what she has to say, engaging in that active listening to be able to have her share that with you, which is a really good starting point to be able to have a discussion potentially on problem solving and bringing in the people that might be important, whether that's parents or presenting some suggestions to her about who she might be able to talk to about those stressors. That, I think active listening would be a good starting point.
Could not have said that better. That was fabulous, Sarah.
Mm-hmm. Any other, okay. How to support a trans boy who still wants to be involved in Girl Scouts?
I think I have the answer to this. or I'll let Jeanette start because I don't want to make sure
So-
that I'm following everything.
Our take on this is if the girl is living their life as a girl, then they're eligible to be in Girl Scouts. So, you know, if the trans boy is living as a girl day in, day out, then Girl Scouts, you know, is open to them. So it's not, you know, yeah. So if they're you know, living as a girl, then they can be a Girl Scout.
How about some of this might come up too, some of the non-binary, gender fluid. I feel like because it's not like that committal to totally male, if that is still something that is.
Right. I mean, our stance is if they identify as a girl and live as a girl, then Girl Scouting is open to them. And I think, let me get on might be quicker to do a search on our website for our volunteer essentials. I think we updated the policy this year. But for support, my take on it is, how would you support a girl in your troop? If they are a registered member of the troop and they identify as a girl, then I think the support is the same. And I think also there's conversations with the caregivers, and depending on the age of the girl, conversations with the girl as well about comfort levels with things. You know, I think those are really important, but being partnership with the caregivers as well as the girl to provide a positive experience. But if they identify as a girl, I don't see that the support has to be any different.
Would agree. We're still showing up, supporting them in the same way as we would any of our other girls that are involved. You know, and I think that goes back to some of our skills that we would use of, you know, having a discussion privately if need be, just affirming, hey, it's no big deal. We're still here to support you. Those, you know, nice core positive atmosphere supports that you would offer, foundational positive atmosphere.
Other questions? These are good.
They are. I was just about to say the same thing.
Trying to search volunteer essentials. And of course, it's not going as fast as I want it to. Do we need to go over any more scenarios? I think your questions have been fantastic. So any other, as we begin to wrap up, we have 15 minutes. Let's see. So Jess says a transgendered boy would be someone who identifies as a boy. Would they not be welcome? Since we are Girl Scouts and we are for girls, if they identify as a boy, I think that my understanding of the policy is they probably would not, boys or Girl Scouting would not be for them. If they identified as a girl, then Girl Scouting is open to them. But these are good questions.
Great.
Let me see. Other questions? I apologize, I can't type and talk at the same time. I have not mastered that yet. Let's see. I'm not seeing any other questions. I'm going to try to send to all of you the handouts, and we have a couple other handouts. We're going to start talking about self-care. So there's some self-care handouts, but while we do that, I'm going to see if I can come up with this policy in Volunteer Essentials. So I'm going to move our slideshow along. Oops. There we go.
Right, where we wanted to make sure we ended with a brief discussion on self-care, both because it's important to promote that and model it for our girls and our troops, but it's also important for us as providers, as troop leaders, for really all adults and kids. And it's something that has become even more apparent after the pandemic and just going through all those hurdles. I think we all realized how essential self-care and building in time for self-care is to just be able to kind of maintain just health and happiness. So one of the things to keep in mind, there's the really old, frequently used metaphor of, or saying, I guess, of you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of others. The whole put on your own gas mask first, but that really applies with self-care, that in order to be supportive to our girls, we also have to make sure that we are in a good place physically and mentally. And it's really important also to realize that, just as we've been saying in terms of turning to our co-leaders for support, that we don't have to do that alone, and that we don't also have to carry the stressors of life alone, and that recognizing that, talking about that, and engaging in self-care is a really great way to model that same behavior for our teens and our girls that we're working with, to just normalize that that's something that we all need to engage in and build space for. And then lastly, just being kind to ourselves and building in some grace and understanding that it can be challenging, whether or not it's the result of the pandemic or just other life stressors, that we all have many things that we're juggling all at the same time, and just being understanding and reflecting that it's okay to have good and bad days and encounter those challenges. And so I think at least two of the things that we wanted to cover with this self-care discussion are two specific practices, one of which is a relaxation-based practice of belly breathing, and then a grounding strategy called the five senses, that are helpful, that everyone could benefit from using, but that our hope would be that if you're comfortable using it for yourself, that it might be something that you could also do with your girls or your troops as well, to lead off activities or at the end of a meeting. But I know I'd also wanted to check in with everyone here in attendance today and get a sense of what sorts of self-care activities do you find helpful to wind down? What are things that maybe you already do on your own, or that you found are helpful to do with the troop at meetings? So I think if people are comfortable putting that in the chat, and we could.
Sarah, what are some of you? I'll share some of mine. My favorite self-care activities, I think, really, journaling. I love that. For me, it is that unwind, the nice bubble baths, some of the breathing. I actually incorporate some of the breathing, which I will be honest, initially I was hesitant to do the breathing. I was like, I don't need to breathe. And I remember learning that in grad school. I was like, no, it actually does really help. shockingly, because it actually is a physiological response that calms your system down, and can be really helpful, to even take that breath or two before you approach a situation, or even when you get home, to kind of take a breath, take a moment, gather yourself. Reading, yes, love the reading. Yoga, all great.
I was going to say forms of exercise, or just going on a walk. And it doesn't have to be for long periods of time, but just building in some of that space and time that is dedicated to yourself, whether that is exercising, reading, journaling, etc. These are all really great examples.
And I saw Jeanette shared the 5 senses and the belly breathing activities in the chat. So those are some great resources as well. You can even potentially, before your group, as you're getting in and settling into your group, you might want to incorporate one of these little mindful activities at the start, just a nice way to kind of gather everybody together, a way to sort of release some of the tension from the day before going into whatever your activity is for that day. That can also be really helpful, especially for those girls who might be fighting. So just kind of, hey, let's take a moment, let's gather, let's relax, everybody can be present, then we can continue forward.
I think we talked about setting the stage for troop meetings, that, when they come to the Girl Scout meeting, you do something symbolic. And I think doing some breathing exercises, some of that belly breathing, and even asking girls to take the lead and take the troop through breathing exercises before the troop meeting starts might help them let go of whatever they bring with them from the day, so that they are present in that troop meeting. That might be one of the activities you can do.
Love that.
So, yeah. And I did find our transgender and non-binary youth policy on the website. It's in the troop management section of Volunteer Essentials. And it talks about Girl Scouts being single-gendered, girl-only centered youth program. And then placement of transgender youth is handled on a case-by-case basis with welfare and best interest of the child and members of the troop group in question a top priority. So that said, if the child is recognized by the family and school community as a girl and lives culturally as a girl, then Girl Scouts is an organization that can serve her in a setting that is both emotionally and physically safe. So hopefully that's helpful. Better said than how I was saying it. So I know my self-care is walking. I have a dog, and walking the dog and just kind of getting out of my house or the office and in the fresh air does wonders.
Animals, petting all the animals.
Oh yeah.
We don't have any animals right now, but petting the animals is really therapeutic.
And I think for a lot of people, that social connection and that social peace can be a really important form of self-care. And in many ways, I think the Girl Scout community and the troops, for a lot of girls, I would imagine, do serve that function as well. So maybe sometimes thinking about and reflecting on the time you're spending together with your troop, or the space you're creating for your girls, is a space where they can then engage in that self-care by having that community, engaging in that social interaction in a really positive environment, which, as we've been discussing throughout our talk today, ways to kind of promote that positivity to make it a place of self-care.
And depending on the age of the girls, sometimes your best laid plans for the meeting or the activity might go awry because of something that's going on at school, something that's happening in the community, and the girls just need time to be together and just connect with each other. And hopefully you're able to recognize those times and able to give them some of that space, because they may not get it elsewhere. This may be the safest space for some of our girls. And so to come together and be silly, to laugh, to play games, to just be girls is really, really important. It's particularly that, well, I think for any girl, but that junior high transition time is really important, where girls can just be themselves.
That's why creating that culture of positivity, of acceptance, of helping build their self-esteem through the works that you're doing, noticing the good things, calling out the good things, supporting them how you can by showing up for them, are all ways that create this safe and wonderful space for them. Like Jeanette said, this might be the only space that they get that's safe and happy for them.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're at 7:28. So the last call for any questions or comments. And I just want to say thank you to all of our participants.
Thank you all so much for your participation tonight. It was great just to work with you. Good luck with everything.
Yes, thank you, Caitlin and Sarah.